So welcome, I'm Hillary Broadwater with QM Design Group. I am also the chairwoman of VIA for 2020. So welcome to our event today. I want to start by welcoming all of you. I know not everybody is a VIA member, but we want to welcome everybody to VIA and make sure that the important information for businesses is getting out there to everybody. So if you have anybody that you know that needs help, needs information, please let them know they can reach out to us. We're here and available for them. They can go to www.via.org. We have information on our site. They can reach out to Kathy or myself as well. I want to thank our sponsors. We have premier sponsors and gold sponsors. These are our year-long sponsors that help to support our organization. Our premier sponsors are the City of Santa Clarita, Nola Aronson's Advanced Audiology, Comfort Keepers In-Home Care, Hyatt Regency Valencia, UCLA Health, American Family Funding, SOS Entertainment, Mission Valley Bank, and The Signal. And our gold sponsors are Thrivent Financial, the Meyer Klein Group, Reliant Relocation Services, QM Design Group, and SCV Water. Through these sponsorships, they help to support our organization and also help to bring a vision. Oh, hang on. I just lost everybody, I think.
Wow.
Tamara, did you share your screen?
No, I didn't.
Okay, somebody just shared their screen with us. We unshare the screen. I think I lost everybody. I apologize because I lost my screen.
No, we're here. I see you.
Okay. Well, I'm going to go on, but I can't now all of a sudden see any of my documents. So give me a second.
So
it looks like Deborah Grandinetti sharing her screen.
Okay, Deborah. We can, I got my documents back up, so I'm good. Deborah, just so you know, you are possibly sharing your screen. Oh, and now I just lost everybody. Can you all see me? There you are. Okay. Sorry. Technical issue. So today we are honored to have Tamara Gurney with Mission Valley Bank on managing your PPP funds. I know there are a lot of questions in regards to how to use them, when to use them, how are we going to move forward with them. I'm going to read you Tamara's bio, and then I'm going to pass this off onto Tamara, and we'll get started with our program. In 1980, Tamara Gurney began her career in community banking when she began work at American Pacific State Bank as the executive assistant to the president. When American Pacific State Bank was sold 20 years later, Tamara was executive vice president and chief operating officer. Today, she is the founding president and chief executive officer of Mission Valley Bank, a $358 million as of December 2019 community-based business bank headquartered in Sun Valley, California. In 2000, Tamara brought together a group of highly respected community business bankers, as well as a number of local area business people to form Mission Valley Bank. After raising slightly more than $6 million in initial capital, together this group opened the doors of Mission Valley Bank in July of 2001. While it wasn't an easy start, the bank's first location was a triple-wide trailer set up in the parking lot of the site that is today serves the bank's 10,000 square foot headquarters building. It worked. Tamara and her team's commitment to build a bank that was more about the client and less about the bank proved to be exactly what the area needed. Mission Valley Bank reached break even after just 11 months of operation and was black over black, or fully profitable in less than 30 months. During 2011, Tamara was recognized by the San Fernando Valley Business Journal as the Valley's most trusted advisor, as well as receiving the Trailblazer Award. I think we have somebody that is very qualified to speak to us in regards to where we all sit with our loans. So Tamara, I'm going to pass it on to you and we can get started with our presentation. Really quick, actually, if you can, If you have questions that you did not send in prior to our meeting today, you can open your chat, drop your chat down to Kathy Norris, and you can send your questions to Kathy, and those questions will get asked, or hopefully get asked if they're not covered in Tamara's presentation. And if you can all make sure that your microphones are on mute, that would be fantastic. Tamara, you're up.
Thank you, Hillary. Thank you to you and to Kathy and Via for giving me the opportunity to speak with everyone today. I know this is a topic that has created a lot of confusion for everyone, not only borrowers, but bankers are struggling to get clear guidance from the SBA and Treasury. And since the program opened, we have our inside joke, which is not really a joke, is that the guidance changes about every 24 to 48 hours. So when we tell you something one day, then we're calling and saying, no, it changed. So I apologize for that, but this is a new territory we're all navigating together, and there are really no experts yet because it's brand new. So I'm going to, start overall with the CARES Act, which was passed on the 29th of March, and Congress allocated several $1 trillion to a myriad of relief programs. But the two that we're going to focus on today are the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, which is referred to as EIDL, and the Paycheck Protection Program, which is referred to as the PPP program. So both of those are still funding. However, the EIDL program is now only funding in the ag space, agriculture. The PPP second round has a little over $100 billion left to deploy. So there is still time for small business owners who didn't get in the first round and have not made it into the second round yet. There's still money to be had. So I'll start with the EIDL program. It is a program that has existed for a number of years in the SBA, and it was typically utilized in natural disasters. So hurricanes, tornadoes, and in California, more likely wildfires and mudslides. When the areas that were affected were designated disaster areas, the SBA gathered its resources and went to the geographic location where the disaster had occurred, and has over the years become pretty efficient at launching the EIDL program in each of those circumstances when they happen. Unfortunately, this is new to them as well, because this is not a geographic disaster, this is a global disaster. And so the EIDL program was modified for the coronavirus, and many at SBA, we learned, were learning as they were going with the program as well, because it came out so quickly. The PPP started on April 3rd. That was the first day of the first round launch. So between the 29th of March and April 3rd, you can imagine a lot of people scurrying around trying to figure out how to do their jobs, because there were a lot of new things that were going on. So the EIDL program is a very good program. It started out with a grant. There's a $10,000 grant that was completely forgivable while the SBA evaluated your full request, your full loan request. And unfortunately for them, they set their benchmarks in terms of delivery of funds based on past experience with other disasters that were more geographic and specific. And in this case, I think any of you that applied, you probably are well aware that the 3-day turnaround for the first 10,000 and then, subsequently within a few days, the remaining funds has not been met. I don't know of anyone that got any money that quickly, but they have just in the last couple of weeks started to get organized around it and catch up. I think they've added resources and they're catching up with the demand, but they were overwhelmed by the EIDL requests when it first opened up. And then the PPP hit shortly after. So the PPP program, as you might expect by its name, Paycheck Protection, is completely focused on, not completely, they added a few things, but the primary focus is protecting payroll, keeping people employed and off of unemployment. And the EIDL has a little bit more flexibility. It can be used for payroll. It can also be used for more items that are not included in PPP, but it can be used for rent and utilities, accounts payable, bills that you were paying, any operational bills you were paying prior to the virus. You can pay those bills with your idle money. So it's kind of a capital preservation. With PPP, you have to, at least currently, the mandate is that 75% of the monies has to go, a minimum of 75% has to go to payroll expenses. The other 25% can be spent, a maximum of 25% on the other approvable expenses, which include rent, utilities, and mortgage interest. And I'll talk about it a little bit later, but there's been a lot of confusion about what's the definition of utilities. And mortgage payments, some people are perceiving as they can pay their mortgage. They can only pay the interest on their mortgages. So these are typically in paycheck protection. That would mean if you have an office space that you're renting or leasing, or you have a building on which you own and you have a mortgage, you can make the interest payment, not the principal payment with these funds. So that's been a source of confusion and concern for a number of people as we move towards the forgiveness phase, which I know most of you, that's the area that you're interested in now, because the $360 billion that started April 3rd and closed late April or mid-April has now been fully dispersed to the borrowers, and that 8-week time clock to spend the money has started. And unfortunately, where we find ourselves is many businesses are unable to open, and those that can open are on a modified opening. We don't expect, for example, when we get to, I think it's phase 3 now, that gyms and hair salons and nail salons and those like that can open. We don't expect people to come back in the same numbers as they did before. And so this will cause business owners to have to determine whether they in fact have to lay some people off again at that point in time. So this is where a lot of we feel and sympathize with the confusion and the concern that people have. And we're trying very hard to get that 8-week time clock to be expanded because of the reality of how long this is stretching out. So kind of a little bit about the difference between idle and PPP. Although you can spend idle money if you received it on payroll, you cannot, if you do that, you cannot take PPP without paying off your idle money through the PPP loan. And I know there are people, because I've spoken to some, who took idle money and they spent a little of it on payroll and some on business operating expenses, but they weren't aware of the fact that the payroll piece, if you used it with idle money, you had to include that amount in your PPP request so that it could be paid off. So how that works in just a simple example, if you took $100,000 in idle money and you spent it all on your payroll, and then you applied for PPP, and let's say your PPP loan request, when you took your average monthly times 2.5, let's say it was 500,000, you would have to up that by the other 100,000 from idle and request 600,000. When that money came through on the PPP, you would receive the 500,000 to start spending over 8 weeks, but the 100,000 would be held back by the bank and paid to the SBA to retire that idle debt. But those people that weren't aware of it are now struggling with, am I going to get in trouble because I used idle on some payroll and now I have PPP? So again, these are some of the confusion that's caused by things happening so fast and not getting a lot of the questions answered in the guidance as quickly as we would have hoped. But also the 100,000, I'm sorry, the 10,000, if you received it, the 10,000 grant upfront from idle, it is a grant, which means that you do not have to pay it back. However, if you do utilize the idle and PPP as I just described, that would be subtracted out of the forgiveness piece in the PPP because it already is a grant. So that's another thing to keep in mind. So when you think about who should apply for which of these programs, with the idle, it's a very good program. One of the drawbacks is if you currently have an SBA loan or any kind of federal agency debt outside of IRS that you're delinquent on, you don't qualify. So that's one thing which would prohibit you from trying to pursue an EIDL loan. On the PPP, if you have a business, particularly with sole proprietors or maybe C corps, or maybe S corps, if you're taking distributions instead of salary, it's not going to work in the Paycheck Protection Program. So early on, when it launched on April 3rd, the independent contractors were included. So people that were waiting for the starting gate to open and had their documents ready, had their various payroll documents along with all the 1099s for some, independent contractors that they use. And by Monday morning, regardless of what we did with trying to process a loan, that was not allowable. Independent contractors, anyone who gets a 1099 has to apply directly themselves. And they would do that by using their Schedule C, line 31 with their net income. So this created some loan requests that had to be pulled back because now independent contractors couldn't be included. This created some confusion. One thing too, on the EIDL, you cannot use the money for dividends or bonuses. You can't make disbursements to owners. So again, if you were taking your monthly or quarterly disbursements out of your business, that's not allowable. Payments to stockholders or principal loans, expanding your facilities or acquisition of fixed assets, repair and replacement of physical damage, refinancing long-term debt, and relocation of your business. None of those are allowable uses of funds under the EIDL program. So something to keep in mind too, and again, I said on the PPP, if you pay yourself through owner draws and member distributions, you should not be looking at the Paycheck Protection Program. So one of the things that banks are doing is utilizing our associations who have lobbying groups in Washington, D.C. And we have been pressing very hard for quite some time now to get better guidance. And one of the major things that we're really focused on, and we're disappointed we haven't received any response, is extending the 8-week period. Because as you can see, if someone is applying today and they get their loan funded, let's say in a week from now, their 8-week clock starts then. They push out further into the summer where there may be more clarity around what impact this is having long-term on your business and your ability to open and begin to generate revenue in which to pay staff or bring them back on board. And those that were in, so many rushed to round one, concerned that money would run out, that the SBA was overwhelmed. And now all that money's out there and the clock's running, and here we are with some vagueness as to, and it's geographic. In some locations of our state are in better shape. I think Ventura's numbers, for whatever reason, are much lower than Los Angeles County. So some of those areas are opening sooner than others, but we're still, you want to get open, but how many people are going to frequent your business depending on what it is. Gyms are the ones that people talk about the most because you're in an environment where you're physically active and we're sweating and touching all the machines going around. And so it's going to be a challenge for them to have full capacity in a reasonable amount of time to use these monies. So we're pushing hard for the 8-week extension. The other piece is the 75%, 25%, how you spend the money. We're also asking the SBA and Treasury to have some flexibility to allow people to pay for more of their operating expenses with PPP as opposed to so much towards payroll. So the PPP, you can spend 100% of it on payroll, but you can't spend more than 25% on the other allowable items. So it makes it tough. You pay your payroll, but you can't pay for some important piece of equipment or something that you need to run your business. And so you're kind of stuck. This is where EIDL and PPP complement each other if you are fortunate enough to have figured the game out early on. As you take EIDL and you run your business with that money, all of your business operating expenses, and you take PPP and you pay payroll. That's the cleanest way to do it, but not everybody has been able to make that happen. In terms of, I'll mention utilities, I mentioned it earlier. In the very beginning, utilities was very clinical. Electricity, water, gas. We couldn't get much guidance, but a few weeks ago they came out with a broader definition, recognizing that here we are on Zoom, so so many of us are dependent upon the internet, dependent upon our telephones. This is how we work and how we communicate. So they did include those items under utilities. There was an interesting one that we've run it up the flagpole, so to speak. Business transportation was specifically, that's the word or verbiage that comes out of the guidance. And we're trying to understand, what does business transportation mean? Is it you putting, your car, driving to and from work, if you are doing that, gas in your car? We aren't sure. We aren't getting feedback, but at least the narrow focus of utilities has been expanded to be more realistic in terms of that. We're also looking for them in terms of forgiveness. There is currently really no guidance at all. And most of what you're hearing is what people are trying to make sense of and have a common sense assessment of what they think the SBA will expect. What we're asking for is not an English narrative paragraph explaining it to us. We're asking for a calculator. Tell us exactly what you want to be produced. And so the guidance we're giving our clients is to prepare a simple Excel spreadsheet, and over the 8-week, put the 8-week periods in and put in the line items where you expect to spend your money. And you can break out payroll, because payroll expenses are not just salary, they are the benefits and the retirement, if you've done 401k, et cetera, anything that's in there that's allowable. And remember, you have to take that $100,000 cash is cut off. So if somebody makes more than 100,000, or maybe they make 90 and then they had a bonus of 15, whatever it is, 100,000 is the max cash. But you don't have to exclude benefits from that. So the other benefits, such as healthcare, dental care, the retirement payment, those things can still be paid through your payroll process to that individual making more than $100,000 in cash compensation. So that's important to remember, and that's where people will get confused or produce inaccurate numbers that will slow the process of forgiveness. One of the things we saw early on when people were applying, they took their average monthly payroll, and there was a lot of confusion about how you got there. But typically it was 2019, if you were in business the full year of 2019 divided by 12 became your average. And then you took your average payroll and multiplied it times 2.5 to get the loan amount you would be requesting. We had people that were adding in their rent and their utilities and other allowable expenses on top of that. And we have to explain the 8-week period for spending the money is 2 months, which is 2 months of payroll. The other half that the calculation incurred to get you more money, another 0.5%, that's the part that you're going to spend on rent and utilities. So you don't add that in. So there were people I know that were concerned when their loan amount they requested, what it came back when we gave them loan documents to sign, it was a lesser amount. And in some cases, we actually ended up with a higher amount because they didn't do the calculation exactly right. Many people had major changes in their payroll in the first 3 months of this year. So you can do, or you could have done, and you still can if you haven't applied, do a rolling 12 months. And if you're seasonal, you can take a specific period of time to make certain that you cover those irregularities in the monthly payroll activity. So those are just some of the things we've learned along the way that for those of you that have not yet applied can certainly take advantage of that and have an opportunity to spend that money over an 8-week period that hasn't started yet. Gives you a little bit more comfort. There has been some discussion lately about the safe harbor. So there's been a safe harbor out there, and that's been modified several times now too. And what that means is the borrower had to certify on the application that due to the pandemic, that their business, the uncertainty of their business operations had been severely impacted. And there was uncertainty, and that's what they were certifying to. The SBA originally said, you have until May 7th to give the money back under good faith under this safe harbor if in fact circumstances have changed or your realization of how your business was impacted had changed and you're not in need of the money. They then expanded that to the 14th, expanded again to the 18th, and now they have said any borrower who received less than $2 million is going to be considered to have certified in good faith, and therefore the quote unquote threat of a full treasury audit has been taken off the table. So again, our advice is to be very thoughtful in your request in determining what you actually do need, because this is so fluid. We have no idea in 2 weeks if any of this will change again. The SBA has already started to look at all of the PPP loans that are in the system right now, and banks have until tonight to review the SBA's notes that have been put in our loan portfolios of PPP loans, because they're already raising questions as to the necessity of these funds to these specific borrowers. So they are, telling you one thing, but they are looking very closely to make certain that there's no fraud in the program. So that's that presumption that you complied has now kind of moved in our favor. And again, the major thing is just tell us what you want. Give us a calculator for forgiveness so that we can help people navigate. Without that, what I can tell you that I'm telling our clients, our borrowers, is segregate the money if you can, keep it in a separate account, but every time you use any of that money, the first dollar you use towards payroll, take a copy of the payroll documents and a copy of, if you have them, of the checks, and put everything together, whether you keep an electronic or a paper file. Every time you touch the money, put every document that supports that use together and keep it in a folder, again, paper or electronic, because the last dollar that you spend, you will then have a full and complete folder that you can take to the bank, and the bank can work through it and determine if you in fact are going to be submitted for forgiveness. That will be the bank's decision based on the documentation you provide. So we want everyone who submits to get their loans forgiven because they've utilized the money appropriately. And we just have to have the documentation from you to prove that. So if you try to put it together at the very end, it's going to be chaos. And the first round of PPP was massive chaos for everyone, not just borrowers, the banks, the SBA, everyone was asking questions and tearing their hair out. It got a lot smoother actually in the second round. But my concern is once we hit the first 8-week period from those that received money almost immediately on, April 3rd or April 6th, it would be probably the soonest day, it's going to be chaos again because we'll have a massive amount of people coming in with more questions than there were on the front end in giving those loans. So we're trying to, again, press very hard. We've got channels with lobbyists at Treasury, at SBA, all the way up to the White House, letting people know you've got to give us direct guidance. We can't operate this way. Business owners can't operate this way. They're going to make uninformed decisions that ultimately hurt their business. And that is not fair, but it is what it is. So I'm going to stop now because I know I'm partway through, and I think that there's quite a few questions that you want to get to. So I don't know, Hillary or
Kathy, do you want to?
Kathy?
Sure. I think you answered several of the questions I think that folks had pre-submitted, Tamara, so thank you very much for that. There are a few others though. One from David Green who says, we received our PPP funding on April 19th. At that time, we had not been able to make our April 15th payroll due to lack of funds. So we paid our April 15th payroll on April 22nd. Will this in any way affect our forgiveness?
And again, I'll have to, because I'm speaking on behalf of Mission Valley Bank, and give a disclaimer. There is nothing in the guidance that addresses the specificity of this kind of a question. So I always fall back on common sense. And I know from experience with SBA, they're not trying to do a gotcha. So the good faith, best effort is where I would answer this question. You did not make payroll when you got the money. You made your first payroll, and you made your first payroll after the date that you received money. I do not believe the SBA will have a problem with that.
Okay, thank you. Also from Laura Kirchhoff, I have been funded for the PPP and the funds were deposited in my bank account. I did not get an email stating that I was approved by the SBA and never received a loan number. The funds just appeared. Other than my initial application with the bank, I have received no loan paperwork or paperwork of any kind to sign and fill out. Should I have received loan paperwork to sign, and is that still coming?
Well, first of all, I'm surprised, and I have a couple of questions myself, and I'm happy to talk offline individually. But my first thought is there is no way that you can receive a loan from the SBA without having signed a loan document. That is just imperative. And so some bank dropping money in your account because they want to be helpful is not helping you or them. So one of my questions would be, did you apply for the EIDL loan? And perhaps that got deposited, or some of the other relief programs that are just coming in, kind of slowly coming into accounts and being deposited. I have had someone tell me, gee, I looked at my bank account and $1,200 was there. Well, that's the individual amount that's coming from Treasury for, based on your annual income that everyone is getting. So the answer is no, you cannot have received PPP loans without signing documents. Are they forthcoming? That I would hope so. I can't speak for whatever bank that is, but it is not best practice and generally not acceptable to fund a loan prior to having signed loan documents. So I think there's a problem there, and my advice would be do not spend the money until this is resolved, and I would call your bank immediately.
Thank you. This one I think you covered a little bit. If you could just reinforce it for us. Do EIDL funds need to be paid back, or is the first $10,000 forgiven? And what if we receive an additional amount? Will that be forgiven as well?
The first $10,000 is a grant. It is forgiven. If you receive additional funding under EIDL, it is a loan, just like an SBA 7A loan, just like disaster loans in past, mudslides. Depending on the status of your business, it is typically a 10-year loan at 3.75%. I believe nonprofits are at 2.75%. So it is the second piece is not forgivable. It is a loan.
Okay, excellent. Here's another question. Are we able to increase the hourly rate of employees at this time to use this funding? Again,
not specifically addressed in any guidance from the SBA, but the purpose, the stated purpose, which I know many people are interpreting more broadly, the stated purpose is to keep your payroll intact, maintain your employees, and do not lower their salaries by more than 25%. So, could you raise their salary to use the money? I hesitate to say don't worry about it because you can't. The business owner giving everyone a raise, I think, is not the intention of the program. I could talk a lot about the challenges that business owners are having. Many of your employees are on unemployment, and because of the additional relief in unemployment of $600 a week, many are making more money than they were when they were working for you. And if you want to rehire them with this PPP money, you have to make a formal offer of employment, and they have to make a formal rejection of your offer. And that will allow you to protect yourself on the forgiveness of that PPP money. However, what it also does is it costs your employee who has rejected your offer to lose their unemployment. I don't see a very happy ending for anybody in that circumstance. So I'm really struggling with how SBA is viewing this and not addressing that issue. But I do not believe that it would be looked favorably upon to simply raise pay to use the money. What we're telling people is to not be so worried that you don't get forgiveness. You can give the money back at the end of the period. If you haven't used it, you simply send it back to the bank with 1% interest on the amount that you've held that isn't forgiven. And the other part, there are many businesses that tell me it's a 1% loan for 2 years, I'll take it. Everybody's got a different circumstance, because believe me, if you're borrowing $500,000 and it's not forgiven, you have 2 years from the end of the 8 weeks, you have 2 years to pay, or no, at the beginning of the 8 weeks, you have 2 years to pay that back. You do the math, that's a big payment every month for some businesses.
Thank you. I have a question here that asks if you have any recommendations for the best program for LLCs that hold real estate but have no payroll.
Oh, that hold. This would be, I believe, considered passive investments, and those are not allowed, those do not qualify for PPP.
Okay. This question from Miles McNamara would like to ask if an owner pays themselves via W-2 wages, is the PPP applicable?
Yes. The owner of a business may be paid through Paycheck Protection. Yes.
Okay, and then we've addressed this, but I'm a little confused on this too. So if you could just please clarify again exactly when the 8-week period starts.
So the 8-week period starts the day the funds are placed in your account. So after you've signed loan documents and the money is then placed in your account, that starts the clock. That is I view it as the day following. So you get the money on Monday, clock starts Tuesday, 8 weeks goes from there. And I don't know what to say to the individual who got money without signing loan documents. That needs to be cleared up.
Okay, this I think is a good question, which you touched on a little bit, but what about if all your employees don't want to come back due to the extra money that is being paid by the federal government? What happens to your PPP at that time?
So yeah, that's a challenge. What we're being told is that if you make a bona fide offer, which means it's in writing to each of those employees, and then each of those employees must respond back in writing that they are rejecting your offer, then you will be protected. Those funds are not going to be considered unforgivable. I know that presents a big problem if you can get open in a month later and all of your employees are not happy because they've lost their unemployment. And in particular, if they reluctantly come back and they're getting more on unemployment than they are getting when they come back to work. These are all the issues that are being created as a result of this lack of guidance in the program.
This is actually a good question here. Since we are closed and will continue to be closed with nothing for employees to do, are we still supposed to rehire them today, even though there is no job to come to for PPP forgiveness? So
again, that was not the intention, although it probably feels like it. If we could sit in a room with the people making the guidance and have this conversation, we could clear all this up. It was not the intention to say there's no work, but I'm going to pay your salary, although that is acceptable and many people are doing that. And then the employees, if that PPP runs out and the business still can't open, they go on unemployment. Unless there's another relief program that comes out, or unless they extend the 8 weeks, in which case, if you sit on your money right now in the hopes, and I'm not offering this as guidance or suggesting you do it, but it's a thought that if you don't spend the money now, give it another 4 weeks. If you just got it, you still have a month, and you can see you're a little bit closer to the light at the end of the tunnel. Is my business going to open? Can I bring people back? But when we've had these conversations with clients, we've strongly encouraged them not to apply if that's the case. Why take the money? But then there's the comfort of knowing at least I have it and I'll figure out what to do. So many have taken the money and they plan to, at the end of the 8 weeks, just return it. And they'll let their employees stay on unemployment because they don't have work for them to do. And when the time clock ends on 8 weeks, they can return the money.
Okay, thank you. We had to furlough a couple of employees. One got another job. Can we replace him with another employee? What happens when we can't rehire them? Would that be, kind of what you just mentioned about returning funds at the end of the loan that were not used?
So if you furloughed somebody and then you're going to do a hire, you can either bring that person back or hire someone else. I'm not going to venture over into California law as it relates to HR because that's complicated. I know LA just passed the right to return stuff and it gets really kind of murky. But in terms of just for forgiveness and PPP, they don't care about the name. They're looking at numbers of employee and dollar amount of gross payroll. And so if you furloughed somebody and you can hire, you've filled a bucket and you should be okay.
Excellent, thank you. Here's one more. Do employees have to have been on salary for a certain length of time prior to the pandemic or prior to PPP funding?
Not necessarily. This is where the calculation of your average monthly payroll gets impacted, because if, let's say you use 2019 average monthly payroll, 12 months of payroll divided by 12 to get your average month, and then this employee started in February. So now you probably should have used the rolling 12 months because that would include at least that employee for 1 or 2 months that they were on the payroll prior to PPP. But no, there's no governance in terms of how long they have to be on. They're on now. You can show payroll at the date that you took PPP and then at the date that you expended the money 8 weeks later. They're looking for conformity.
Okay, thank you. In your opinion, if there is an extension beyond the initial 8 weeks, and we've already received PPP funding in the first round, do we need to reapply and make a new request?
No, there is only one PPP loan per business or individual allowable, so you would not be able to. The only time you can increase funding, and this just is new in the guidance in the last few days, is if one of the examples they used was a partnership that applied for PPP using the employees' salaries and did not include their own salaries. And those are now allowable, so they can go back. They need to do it pretty quickly and go back and put in their salary information and request an increase, and that will be granted according to the SBA. But there's only one PPP loan. As banks are going into what's called E-Trans, the system for SBA to issue an SBA loan number. When that loan number is issued, that means your loan is approved. And it's only approved when they check their database against your EIN or TIN number or Social Security. And what we've received probably in the last 2 weeks are more than a dozen requests where they kick back out saying, no, this entity already has a PPP number at another institution. So you can only apply once.
Okay, thank you. Here's an interesting question. They say, I applied for the EIDL loan on the first day it was available. I received $5,000 without any additional information, and then received an email yesterday that I have been granted up to $102,000, but the website link is COVID-19 relief, and I'm not sure if this is legitimate. I've not had time to research because I just got this yesterday. Any information would be appreciated.
Yeah, that is one of the red flags. There's become a lot of fraud in this space, and COVID-19 relief to me would be raise a red flag, and I would go back through channels in the EIDL program. That one does not sound legitimate to me.
Okay, give me just a second. I just got a flurry of other questions in. I'm sorry, give me one moment.
Yeah, I see a bunch of them.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Is an independent contractor is on my payroll, can their pay count in any way towards PPP?
No. Independent contractors you have to exclude them from your payroll, and they have to apply on their own directly.
Kathy, can I jump in a little bit?
Go ahead. Yes, please, Hillary.
As I can see a bunch of questions coming in as well. So Tamara, somebody's asking, can you go into detail in regards to healthcare benefits? Would this cover a company's full monthly bill on benefits, or would it exclude fees, et cetera, on the bill?
It would cover the full monthly benefit for health benefits. And those, even for, let's say the business owner makes more than 100,000, the benefits piece is considered non-cash compensation. So irregardless of capping individuals at the 100,000 cash, you can still pay the full healthcare benefit to them. And those are payroll expenses, and it's fully appropriate.
Another one here under PPP, could we use funds for liability and property insurance?
I know that you can for insurances related to payroll. That would be outside of what the guidance specifically addresses for other approvable expenses in paycheck protection. That is something that you could pay with EIDL money.
Okay. If you received your PPP loan for a sole proprietor's net Schedule C, what expenses are allowed to use the PPP funding to make it a grant?
For a sole proprietor Schedule C net income, if they have no employees, then that is all that is allowable. There aren't expenses allowed. If they do have employees, they are able to take those other allowable expenses, such as the healthcare and retirement, that type of thing.
Excellent. Are guaranteed payments to a partner considered payroll when determining the PPP loan request amount?
That, I believe, falls in alignment with distributions. It has to be a payroll. There has to be a document, a 941, a W-3, where it processes through payroll. A guaranteed payment is like a distribution or a bonus. If they aren't running through payroll systems where taxes are affected, it isn't applicable to the payroll protection.
I'm getting some privately as well. Tamara, you mentioned insurance related to payroll as being forgiven. Would that include workers' comp premiums?
Yes.
I'm trying to filter through as Kathy filters through.
Yeah, we've got a ton of them.
There's a lot of questions.
How about if an employer's portion of state taxes is included in payroll expense, does that include SDI?
That's a good question. It's my understanding it does. We're dealing with gross payroll, and I'm happy to get to snip it out of the guidance that I have to just confirm that. I know a lot of people want something more concrete, or some exact document that says this is what it is, and I think I have that in my folder. I'm happy to send it back to you. And also, if we don't get to all these questions, if you want to forward them to me, I'm happy to address them and send them back. Then you can put them on your website or whatever.
We can do that for sure. That is a great idea. So to clarify, workers' comp insurance is forgivable. Somebody's asking. They were told no.
It's part of the payroll expense package. Yes.
Are payroll taxes covered?
Yes.
Okay.
Whoops.
And there again, I will give you the guidance on that because it went back and forth. At first, it was not the employer portion, and then they changed it and said, let's just go on gross payroll. But there is a calculation to that I would need to get you.
Okay, so somebody's asking that we ask another question that somebody asked earlier. Regarding the headcount calculation, will employees that voluntarily quit be counted towards the headcount for the PPP loan forgiveness? For example, let's assume I had an average of 40 employees between January 1st, 2020 and February 29th. 10 of my employees quit voluntarily at some point in 2020, and I remain an average of 30 full-time employees during the 8-week period after my loan disbursement. Will I be counted as having 40 full-time employees for the calculation of the loan since 10 had declined work that was available? If so, does it matter when the employee quit for them to be counted towards the head count?
Wow. This is when you wish you really were an expert. I know, again, this is all just sort of subjective and common sense. They're not looking at names of people. They're looking at numbers. They're looking at head count and total payroll. Going on what they've put out with how you can make a written offer of employment and it has to be in writing rejected, I would make a guess that anyone who resigned during the time frame that you received PPP funding or you utilized those numbers for your PPP loan amount, that you would need something to evidence the fact that they voluntarily terminated employment. And the question that I have then is, if you needed them or you needed that position covered, would you not now with your PPP funds hire someone else to fill that? So this is where I would need the guidance from SBA in terms of the level of detail of that question is very thoughtful, and I get where the concern is, but we'll put up 10 people and I'll give you 10 answers. So I'm happy to keep that and keep digging to get more, but that's what I know today.
All right, so I'm gonna end with one last question, and then we're gonna tie it up. We will take everybody's questions, put them together in a document, reach out to Tamara if we need additional answers to answer all of them if they were not answered today, and we'll send that out to everybody. The last question is regarding payroll taxes. Are both state and federal taxes included or just state?
No, state and federal. And again, that's where I'll provide you that calculation. There's specific language in the guidance that you can, if you want, you can post on your website.
Perfect. Okay, so we're gonna wrap up today's presentation. I wanna give everybody time to move on. I know there is another presentation. I wanna remind everybody, if you have signed up for it, at 10 o'clock is the Chancellor's Circle briefing, which begins at 10, improving employee engagement during post-COVID-19. I know a lot of people signed up for that, so I just want to remind you that that starts at 10. I want to thank you all for joining us today. If you have any questions, feel free, please reach out to us. You can reach us at via.org, or you can email Kathy at kathy@via.org. And we will do our best to put together all of these questions and get them answered and back out to you. Hopefully a lot of stuff got answered today. I know I was able to answer a few questions myself. So thank you very much. Tamara, thank you for your time and your knowledge. Yes, George, a round of applause.
Oh,
yes.
no. I appreciate
So
it. Thank
much,
you.
Tamara.
One thing, there was a question, just one thing I would like to say is when you get to the 8 weeks, and you want to get the stress off and know that you're forgiven, don't wait for your bank to call you. Call the bank, because they're going to be inundated as well. So I think it's up to the borrower. Make a call to your bank and say, I'm done, 8 weeks is over, now what? And get the ball rolling on their end.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
All right, thank you, everybody. Have a fantastic weekend.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Tamara. Very appreciated.
You're very welcome. Good luck to
Yeah.
everybody.